Well, welcome along to another episode of the Gary Neville podcast. Gary, we've just witnessed what was a very exciting game here at London Stadium. 4-2 for West Ham in the end against Brentford. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it was what West Ham needed. They were desperate for it. Obviously, Brentford are desperate for points as well, but the pressure that was building with David Moyes, and obviously in this stadium tonight, it could have got quite difficult if Brentford score an early goal. So the way in which West Ham started the game was fantastic. We interviewed David Moyes before the game, didn't we? And he was really relaxed and asked him the question about the balance between trying to be, pumped up at the beginning and get the fans on side and going for it versus being patient and not, if you like, ended up in a situation whereby it goes against them. So those two early goals that Jarrod Bowen scored, I think you gave me the stat before the game, but remind me, how many games hadn't he scored for?
Seven league games.
Yeah, 7 league games. So, I mean, look, for him to be been brilliant at the first part of the season, to not score for 7 games but get a hat-trick tonight was big. And Paquetá back seemed to give everybody a boost. And they were maybe playing against the right team as well, who Brentford just a little bit below par.
I think before this game as well, when you look at the what the media was saying and how these two teams are going to come up against each other, people were predicting 1-1, but we certainly got an exciting game. The fact that West Ham came out so quickly, did you think take Brentford by surprise and they never really were able to find their composure again?
Yeah, there was an inquest, wasn't there, after the second goal? I think they were shocked, Brentford, in how West Ham had started the game. They weren't at it, but they got themselves back into it, Brentford. I mean, they scored the goal, but something wasn't quite right with Brentford. But I think you're right, that first part of the game was a real shock. There was a strange atmosphere in here tonight. Obviously, it's been difficult here recently, and I think that when Brentford scored that goal, there was a feeling in the stadium, oh, here we go. And I was worried about it from a West Ham point of view, particularly that 10-15 minutes at the start of the second half. I just thought that West Ham was sat back. Brentford weren't doing amazing things in the final third, but they were certainly pressing forward. And then out of nowhere, sort of West Ham got that third goal. But in the first half, they had lots of chances. Paquetá brings a lot of arrogance. Kudus has got something. He just needs to be a little bit more... what's the word? Yeah, his final choice. He just needs that maturity in his game that sometimes wingers, they have it whereby they're unpredictable, but unpredictable to everybody. Unpredictable not just to the opposition, but unpredictable to their own players that don't know when they're going to make a run. In the first half, he had 3 or 4 wild shots that were from positions where he could have played a final pass. And I did say in that first half, the one thing that David Moyes could say at half-time was for him to be a little bit more precise in what he was doing. And that third goal, I think, came from him really being direct and putting that lovely little cross in for Jarrod Bowen, which was a big moment in this game. I mean, the Emerson one was huge as well because it gave them that little bit of breathing space. But that third goal was big because that was a point in the game where it could have gone wrong for West Ham. So Brentford were shocked, I think, by what happened at the start of the game. But it was West Ham's night. And they're in 8th position. They talked before the game about David Moyes' job. I know that one thing you can never talk to West Ham fans is about West Ham because they know the club better than anybody. And it's almost as if a little bit like that where would West Ham want to be in the league? Yeah, of course they want to be in the top 4, but that's unrealistic. I'd say 8th. The level on points now with Brighton, who are 7th. If you said to West Ham at the start of every Premier League season, you're going to be sort of 7th, 8th. That's probably where they would be with the budget that they've got. And they're a big club, West Ham. And last season they won a trophy, but they're not going to break into that top 6 realistically with the money that's being spent above them. And if they did, that would be massively punching above their weight. So I think there's just that element of sometimes, they've heard that same voice, they've seen that same football, they've seen that same man for many years. But David Moyes has done a really good job here. And like you say, at this moment in time, I'm just looking at a league table up there above us, and it's, they're where they should be. I mean, they're above Newcastle at this moment in time. They're a few points off Manchester United and Tottenham. It's not doom and gloom, and I think now what David Moyes will be hoping is that from this they can go on and kick on.
Well, it's certainly looking rosier for West Ham. Not so much the same story for Brentford, though, who are 5 points from the drop. Do they have to be worried this season?
I just think the 3 teams at the bottom, they're better than them, so I think they'll be okay. But they'll be a little bit worried, the ownership, the manager, that they're just maybe this team, quite a few of them have been together for a long time, and obviously it's been held together by Tony. He's probably going to leave at the end of the season, but there is a period of uncertainty coming potentially. If Tony leaves, how do they replace him? How do they only played without him for much of this season, so that's not the end of the world. But I just think there's something happening at Brentford that might be, they just need that spark, that's something. I know there's a talk of a potential, you know, an injection of cash from a part sale or a full sale, and you know, Matthew Benham's done a fantastic job at Brentford, and you know, a real sort of, I would say, example of how to run a football club. It just feels like that moment's needed, maybe, where they just need something, because they've got a really good manager, got a good group of players. I love going to watch Brentford play, but it just feels a little bit tired at the moment, and they just need to get to the end of the season. But I do think they will stay up.
We've had quite the weekend in London, haven't you? Yesterday, Wembley.
It was a terrible start on Saturday. So I came down early on Saturday to watch Salford. They lose. I'm watching them on the link, and United then lose in the last minute. And City win. Disastrous Saturday, but
And then it got better for you on Sunday.
no, it didn't. It was Liverpool. Well, exactly. In fact, what was a good weekend? What was good about this weekend? It was absolutely shocking. I just realised. Get me home.
So go on. You were there. You witnessed it. What did you make of the cup final? Were Chelsea up for it, or Liverpool just simply the better side?
No, I honestly, I think the game, I think, in 90 minutes was. I mean, look, both teams could have won it, but Chelsea had big chances towards the end. Liverpool had that disallowed goal. They both had good chances in the first half. And you couldn't really separate the teams, and they just didn't have that killer instinct in the 90 minutes of play. I think where the game really swung for me was in extra time. Just going back to before the game, there was a thought I had, and I said it on the Sky Sports News interview that I did, that I couldn't see Jurgen Klopp stood down there on the pitch at the end watching the Chelsea players going up and celebrate winning the League Cup final. Just sometimes, you know, at Manchester United I played under a manager who seemed to be able to have that very special sort of ability to be able to sort of grab a big game, and Jurgen Klopp's got something about him that's special, there's no doubt about that. And yesterday they were depleted, Liverpool. You know, they had many players missing. I know Chelsea had a couple as well, but you know, Liverpool had some of their big players missing: Nunez, Salah, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Szoboszlai, Alisson, 5 of the best players. And then at the end of the game, the very end of the game, they only had 2 players on the pitch really at the end that you would put in any starting 11 for Liverpool. So you know, Van Dijk and Diaz. So extra time for me was the most disappointing part for Chelsea. And in some ways, the most admirable part for Liverpool. You had to respect what went on in that last sort of half an hour of the game. It was a spirit, it was an energy, it was a feeling. There were young players playing for Chelsea, but there were young players playing for Liverpool. But the young players playing for Liverpool, you could see it in the hearts, you could feel it. Whereas the young players for Chelsea haven't got that association with the club yet. They haven't built that sort of what would be the energy and spirit that exists when you've had the sort of success that Liverpool have had in the last 8 years under that manager, with the connection between him and the fans and the players. And those young players that came in for Liverpool, you could feel that it meant something on the pitch. And the Chelsea players, I felt as though for 90 minutes it meant something. But in the end, that last 30 minutes, I was so disappointed. With the way in which they approached it. That game was there for the taking. I was so disappointed from it from a sporting perspective. Just when you see that sometimes you see there's a game there for the taking, go and grab it. That's your moment. That's your opportunity to go and do something, to get a medal around your neck, to go and sort of make that big jump forward. The League Cup has been a sort of springboard for many, many teams to go and do well in the coming seasons, and that was a great chance for Chelsea, for Mauricio Pochettino and those players today, and they missed that chance and didn't take it. They took a step back in that extra time period.
I know this will pain you to think about it, but of course Liverpool still have the opportunity for a couple more trophies this season. Do you think the fact that they've got one early on gives them even more of a taste for silverware, especially in Klopp's farewell season?
Yeah, I mean, if they didn't have Klopp as a manager, I would say that, to be fair, that might be as good as it gets. But that with it being his last few months and the energy and the spirit that he's, you know, you just know what's going to happen there. And, you know, I still don't think they'll win the league, but they could. They could go and win, you know, 3 or 4 trophies because that's what he's capable of. And I said yesterday at some point, yesterday he had a bantamweight sort of team out on the pitch, a middleweight squad, but he punches like a heavyweight, and that's what great managers do. They're able to get more out of the players than than you would imagine that they could, and he's done that for a number of years now. You know, the other clubs around have spent a lot more money, and he's still been right up there. And they could have a sensational season. It's obviously going to be a good season already because no one expected Liverpool to be up there challenging for the Premier League title at the start of the season. So, look, it's a good start. Yesterday was a big day for Liverpool, and they smelt blood in the last half an hour of that game. There was a period, if you were watching, I don't know, part way through the extra time period, where the fans, Liverpool fans, just got right up for about 5 minutes, and you could feel that they were willing their team forward, that they knew that there was something there for them. Because at the start of extra time, I wasn't sure it was there. And those Chelsea players will regret that last 30 minutes. They'll carry that with them. They really will, because they should have really gone for it. Liverpool had a B team, a reserve team out there with 3 or 4 kids on the pitch. I didn't even know who they were before the game.
Let's move on to Manchester United. You said that your weekend had started badly. Manchester United defeat against Fulham at home. What did you make of it? Because when you look at the way that some of the results that have gone for Manchester United, nobody can really say whether a game's going to be won or lost with them. And then they go to Old Trafford and they lose against Fulham.
Yeah, I mean, I'd watched the last 2 games away from home at Luton and Villa, and they hadn't played well in either of the games for periods. But they win. But you can't be surprised that Manchester United lose any game of football, because when the performance levels are what they are, which is just like this, so inconsistent, at times during games, a really poor level of performance, you're going to get beat. You're going to lose games. You're going to win games as well, because they've got good players out on the pitch at times and they surprise you, but you shouldn't be surprised when they lose games because the performance levels aren't good enough. I watched the highlights of the game. I didn't see the full game, but I watched the highlights of the game on Sunday morning, and I wondered whether the match of the day highlights had been doctored, because the first half I was like, did we actually have an attack? Fulham should have scored 3 or 4, and the second half it was something similar. There was a bit of a flurry at the end, and the daft thing is when United equalised, and I'm in my room there on Saturday, I'm thinking, right, they're going to go on and win. That's what Manchester United do, and Fulham go up the other end, Iwobi scores, and you're like, right, okay. And that is really, really a big problem for the manager and for the coach, because results are important. Obviously, they're critical for every manager and coach. But I think if you're looking at sort of building a project, and I don't like using the word, but if you are looking at building a project, then you've got to see progression, and you've got to see direction, you've got to see where it's going. And that's the problem at this moment in time. That isn't just me, it's everybody that watches United, or that's a fan, that everybody who watches United that isn't a fan. It's like, what kind of team are they? I think Carragher's just described them tonight as a team that plays, with a high press, but with a low block, like almost like sort of the defence is here and the sort of attacks up here, and there's massive gaps in midfield. Well, those massive gaps in midfield have been there since Wolves' first Monday Night Football of the season. I watched a game in pre-season. I think was it Lille or Lyon? I can't remember the exact game. Now it was a French team. And I thought that, the gaps in midfield was staggering, because Casemiro was here and Mount and Fernandes were up there, and they were sort of like up nearly on the last line. And there's huge gaps around Casemiro. We know, to be fair, hasn't got the legs to be able to cover those spaces. So it's been a reoccurring theme all the way through, that they're easy to counter-attack on, they're easy to play through. They don't really press with any real sort of organisation and sort of what would be aggression. And yet, if they do press a little bit, the back players aren't really the quickest, so they drop off. Whereas when you watch City, Arsenal and Liverpool, the back line's really high, the midfield players are sort of compact and they press, and then the front players are connected as well. And it looks like there's no gaps to play through. And the Manchester United are the opposite, so that's sort of, if you like, out of possession. Then in possession, they're an odd bunch in that you don't really see patterns and combinations of play of a team that have been together sort of 12, 15 months, the most of them. So again, really worrying signs that a team that plays really without personality at times, and they're up and down, and you're just looking for them to build performance levels as much as results. I think if you're performing well and the results aren't quite coming, you can say, okay, there's something building. You can see the way in which the team's going, and that's the real concern I have at this moment in time. We've been saying it all season. and it's not getting any better. And that result on Saturday was a bad one. Look, they're still daft enough to go and qualify for the Champions League and hunt down Villa and Tottenham, but they're so unpredictable, they're so inconsistent and difficult to watch at times.
It sounds like you're really positive for the derby coming up.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I was always thinking that, you know, beating Villa, beating Luton, win against Fulham at home, you're right on the tails. Tottenham, obviously, his game against Chelsea was Friday night football, was cancelled because of the Carabao Cup final, so Tottenham didn't play. So you're right up with Tottenham. And then, to be fair, I think Tottenham play Villa not next weekend, the weekend after. So you know there's going to be points dropped between one of them there or both of them. So actually, next Sunday became a game whereby you're playing against one of the best teams in the world. It's, you know, it's a game where you're likely to lose, but go and have a free hit. You know what I mean? Because you've won so many points in the last few weeks, and you've got Villa and Tottenham the week after. I'd almost in my mind built this scenario that was going to occur. But it's not occurred because they got beat by Fulham at home. So, yeah, next week against City, you're almost... yeah. What can you say? I mean, you're almost in the lap of the gods a little bit, aren't you? Thinking that you hope that Manchester United come out of there with some level of respect. That's where you start, really, which is a bad place to start from as a Red. You're thinking, you're going into that game thinking, I just hope we don't get done, you know, good. Then I hope that we compete. And then I hope that it's close, and then I hope that we might get a draw. But it's a long way in your mind before you start to think that we're going to win there. You know what I mean? It's like you can't quite get yourself into that sort of idea of, right, how do we win this game? And that's the thought process I've always had as a Manchester United fan. How do we win this game? How can Manchester United win today? And it's getting more and more difficult in games like this away from home against the big teams. I know it's the first time they beat a big team a couple of weeks ago, Villa. But even then, that game, you know, could have gone the other way. But you know, you're thinking, how do they get to that point where they go and beat a big team? And yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm sure that, you know, I'll be worried. I'm worried today, and then I'll forget about it tomorrow. And as the game builds later on in the week, I'll sort of walk towards the Etihad on Sunday, and I'll think, right, cool, we've got a chance here. I'll be telling myself we've got a chance, and that's the optimism of a football fan. But yeah, let's see what happens.
Let's move on to Everton, who have had some news today as well. Their points deduction, their 10-point deduction, reduced to 6 points by the independent advisory panel. Just your thoughts on that, because that does push them a little bit higher up in the table.
Yeah, it gives them a little bit of relief, that Everton, and gets them away from it. They've got that stadium coming next year. They can't afford to go down. They've never been able to afford to go down. No team can. But Everton probably worse than most. I've not read the ruling yet. Have you read the ruling yet? There was I think a ruling was released today, but I've not seen the actual detail of why it's gone from 10 to 6. There was a feeling that it would be reduced, and it has been, and Everton fans will feel vindicated that they were dealt with too harshly first time round. And Everton will be okay now, I think. I mean, they probably would have been okay anyway, but they were certainly under big pressure. That extra 4 points, you know, that'll be a welcome relief for them. And put them into a position whereby they can hope they can have a more relaxed end to the season. But they've still got a job to do. As of Brentford, you know, they've still got to go and get, you know, between 10 and 15 points to stay in this league. And every game you win in the Premier League when you're down at the bottom, and I don't have any experience of that personally, but when I watch teams towards this end of the season, I just feel like it's an event to win a game of football. You've seen West Ham here tonight. Pushed the way up into 8th. It feels like a really big moment for them. It's a real struggle to win a game in the Premier League, and you know it should be respected when you do, particularly when you're down there. So let's see what happens now for Everton. They should be okay. Those 3 teams that came up last season, obviously Burnley, Sheffield United, really struggling. Luton now obviously a little bit isolated with what's happened with Everton today.
Good. I haven't got anything else for you.
Is that it? Can I go home? Can I go back to Manchester?
Can I go home?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Do I need to end it?
Yeah, that's it. Oh,
all right, it's done.
That was the Gary Neville podcast.